Welcome to the InfoMullet YouTube channel. If you enjoy this content, please like or share. And if you'd like to support the InfoMullet by becoming a mulleteer, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate your support. Comparison, we're not alone in this, right? Wave 2 has hammered Europe as well. And I wanted to do an update on the pandemic responses where I've selected 4 countries that are representative of different style pandemic responses, and I've been tracking these 4 countries since the beginning. That's why I still use these 4 countries. It's not to pick on Sweden particularly, although it feels that way, but it's to here. Let's see, make sure this is prepped right before there we go. All right, so the pandemic responses, I track Germany, which is a practitioner of the hammer and the dance, as it should be. Hammer and the dance means you do a lockdown, and in that lockdown, the initial lockdown, you build your contact tracing, you build your testing capabilities, you open back up. That's the dance. Hammer lockdown, dance open back up. Then if things rise again, you do a lockdown in a certain area, either lockdown a limited area or broad area. So you're dancing back and forth between these lockdowns. Most countries that are doing this well practice a hammer and dance approach. Pandemic panopticon, South Korea. This is a very technical, very intensive, like low privacy, data driven response, but it's also a lot of compliances, things like masking, very heavy masking. So for people who are like, well, masks don't work, look at us, ask them to get outside their United States zone once in a while and go look at another country that uses masks. This is the thing that drives me nuts. People are like, the US is bad, therefore masks don't work, because if masks works, we're the best and we're using masks, therefore no, we're not. It just, so let me show you where we're at, and this will be a few charts here. This is the daily new cases per capita on a 7-day moving average. So this per capita, just to be clear, when I do charts, I do per 100,000 because that's the measure we use in most violence studies. It's just habit. Other charts we're using per million. It's just 100 difference if you want to, or 10 difference, excuse me. If you want to get the same numbers, multiply this by 10. But it looks at the days since first confirmed case. So these are not calendar aligned. They're aligned by the days of the outbreak. It has the 4 countries. Green here is the hammer and dance of Germany. Brown is the pandemic panopticon in South Korea. Red is induced herd immunity / voluntary fire break with Sweden. And blue is thoughts and prayers, the US. Now, dear Swedes, maybe this time you'll listen to me, because it's been a struggle over the last 6 months to help you understand that what you're doing just isn't working. And it didn't work when you had this wave here outbreak. This is Sweden, by the way, in red. And it dropped. And during this drop period, I had all sorts of people coming up on my feed saying, well, yeah, we suffered a little bit and killed half our old people, but hey, we got herd immunity, or we got T-cell immunity, or we got antibodies, or whatever the thing is. There was always a reason. I said, I hope you're right, because if you're not right, you are going to get hammered when this wave 2 comes along. And here we are. And look at this. Sweden is almost as bad as the US for cases per capita. Now, absolute numbers way different. Sweden's only having a few thousand per day, but as a country, it's 10 million. That's the size of the greater metro Atlanta area. Sweden is a small country. So when you get 5,000 or 6,000 people a day, that's a lot of infections. And it's matching the US here. Now, take Germany. Germany is suffering. They have a outbreak just as bad as the US height in the summer outbreak, but you can see they're already tapering off. They're already beginning to implement. They're trying to implement their hammer. Merkel's getting some pushback. It's called a light hammer now, light lockdown, but it's a lot better than what we're doing. But Sweden, last week, Anders Tengel, who is the director of the health policy that's driving this, had the audacity to say that they're going to stay the course, and they were doing fine. And this is last week. Now, that has collapsed underneath them in the last couple of days. The prime minister has come out. Even the king of Sweden, Gustav himself, has come out and said, all right, we need to do something different. So hopefully Sweden is now got its game together, because what they've announced is what I would call the beginnings of a hammer approach. They used to have, I think gatherings were limited to 300 people, which is like saying nothing. They were limited to 50 back here in the outbreak. Now they're limited to 8. They've literally dropped it down to 8 people per gathering. There are curfews in place for some of the things. Now, bars and restaurants are still open. So, I mean, it's not like it's a full lockdown, anything but. And Sweden, you don't have the ability to do anything about gatherings in private homes, so they can't make rules like that. But it's going to be interesting to see whether Sweden, after months and months and months of this propaganda of we're special, we're different, we know this better than anyone else, is going to be able to adjust in time before they have to, have the consequence of these very high rates of infections come back to hit them. And I hope they do, because this is not good for anyone. I mean, like I said, wave 2 is hitting Europe across the board. Now, you're going to find countries like UK, Italy, maybe France, they're probably doing worse than Sweden. But Sweden's supposed to be the bellwether. Sweden's supposed to be the country that knows how to do this stuff better than anyone else, and they have absolutely dropped the ball on this. And part of it is this populist nationalism that is just like the Trumpers here in the US. They don't want to listen to the science. They don't want to consider the fact they might be wrong, and they make decisions which are irrevocable. Now, last time I did this, I talked about making a death pact with your first choice. Sweden made a death pact, but they're backing away from it. So I'm hoping that as they put in place these measures, the Swedes are able to adopt them quickly without the resistance we're seeing in the US and curb this, because I don't want Sweden to suffer. I mean, I don't want the US to suffer, but I don't see a way out of it for the US. We're kind of hosed at this point. And look at their near neighbors, right? This is Sweden compared to, I talked about the UK, Italy. Sweden, take Sweden's geographic neighborhood. Countries that share borders with them, share population similarities, culture similarities, economic similarities. Italy's a lot different than Sweden, but Finland and Norway, pretty similar. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Denmark. And what this chart does is, I've updated a few times. On the left is deaths per 100,000 people, and this orange is actually population per square kilometer, which is population density. Because one of the arguments of the many arguments. See, that the problem with national populists is they just come up with argument after argument that's always wrong. And what they need to do is, when they get, say, 5 arguments in a row that are wrong, they need to sit down and shut up, because they've got a track record that they don't know what they're doing. But one of the questions was population density. And I'm like, look, Germany's got a population density close to 240, and its deaths per capita are only not even a third of Sweden's. And these are normalized for populations. Germany's a much bigger country, but deaths per capita, Denmark, very dense area, far less deaths. And then you go down here and you have, Norway and Finland are now at, like, I think 6 and 5. So you're literally talking about a death rate nearly 20 times. And this is because of this bad pandemic response. So it's, when I say the US is doing bad, it's not doing bad in isolation, it's joined by others. But we need to stop this mythologizing of Sweden as having the great answer, because there are people in the US who are like, oh, we should try the Swedish model because they get to be open. Well, look at what it does. It doesn't work. And this shows, when you plot these against those 4 pandemic response, this is Sweden. Now, it has flattened out, whereas the US was just kind of like an escalator, right? The US is just continually climbing at this 1,000 a day clip. The Swedes did flatten out, but you can see it's clipping back up again. They've got low single digits, double-digit deaths now per day. Even Germany, right? With that spike I showed you, yeah, Germany's increasing, but look at the difference between Sweden and Germany. Germany is an example of the hammer and the dance. That's the method that I think we could do here in the US. I don't think we could do the pandemic panopticon. I don't think our privacy laws or our legal infrastructure can deal with this level of invasive surveillance. But we can certainly do the hammer and the dance. And this shows the difference between countries, between induced herd immunity, voluntary fire break. By the way, voluntary fire break doesn't work, just in case you weren't aware. No, not much better than induced herd immunity. We figured that out in March, but Sweden had to give it a go. And I'm hoping that they do get it in control, because what I don't want to see is that Sweden starts following the US and continually going up. So let me pause here and see if there's any angry Swedes on my feed yet. Let's see here. We can neither confirm nor deny that the King of Sweden specifically said, listen to Tim. No, I don't think he did. But his message was it was literally had exclamation points in it. It was like, hold on, exclamation point, hold, exclamation point, like, hold the line. Like, I'm imagining the King of Sweden's like Gandalf with less hair, a little staff, and he's like, hold the line, you shall not pass. And I don't know what the royal protocol is that a king's got to use an exclamation point, like, someone rid me of this meddlesome priest, exclamation point. Maybe if they didn't put the exclamation point, this guy'd still be alive. But when a king puts an exclamation point on something, that means something. Yeah, and Trisha's saying it takes time to explain to them exhausting. Tricia, this is why all these video clips are on the YouTube, and they're clipped down to be bite-sized, 5 to 15-minute, so bite-sized to hungry man, full-size Snicker. But that's why I do these video clips. So you can just take the clip, get the link, and just respond to them with a video clip. Yeah, people are saying after the third argument, your arguments are bad, your data is bad, and you should feel bad. And look, it sounds like we're picking on people, but we're in the situation we've been warning about for months, and it's happened the way we described it would happen. So in some ways, I kind of wish that they would just, you know, get on board. But for those who are joining now, we're adding a new Patreon level called MEGA-MULLETEER. This is going to be something Ed Cook's on now. Ed recommended the MEGA-MULLETEER level. Probably going to be 25 bucks a month or something like that. Get some free merchandise. But the big thing coming up is we have the New Year's Eve Ask Me Anything. And this is when you can ask me any question you want to forecast from me, or Bonky, the emotional support donkey, our team of the system dynamicist, systems thinker, and the emotional support donkey, that you can ask what's going to happen in the year ahead on this topic. Past questions have been, what's the chance of civil war breaking out in the US? Who's going to win the presidency? Who's going to win the Democratic primary? Is Brexit going to be a hard Brexit or a soft Brexit? What's going to happen with Iran hegemony in the Middle East? What's going to happen with stability? What's going to happen with economics or Wall Street numbers? And I put in detailed responses and forecasts. And we'll spend the next month or two doing a review of the 2020 forecasts. You know, I don't want to say I get them all right. That's clearly wrong. But these forecasts, I don't just try and say, here's a prediction, but I say, here's a forecast of what's going to happen. And all the things I think about when I make these forecasts, I put in these articles. Then I also say, if I'm wrong, this is how I'm going to be wrong. And if you go and read the 2020 forecast, you will see references to, if I'm wrong, it's because of a police shooting that leads to a Black Lives Matter protest movement breaking out over the summer. So I may have been wrong on one thing, but I'm right on the way I'm wrong, which is one way to put it. So again, for MEGA-MULLETEERS, you're going to have a chance to ask these forecasting questions and vote on the ones, because I want to keep it limited to 10 to 15, so I have a good, I can get a good amount of data. But the MEGA-MULLETEER Patreon level is coming up. Stay tuned for details. The sign up will come. It'll be 25 bucks a month, and we appreciate all our Mulleteers. You guys are fantastic, and yeah, you could do questions for Bonky. That might be at a lower level, or it might be at a higher level, actually. And in fact, I've even had someone recommend a nationalist Patreon level where you just pay like $1,000 a month and you get me on Zoom and yell at me for how wrong, which is a really good idea, but I don't think I want to get that in my life. Ed's asking about emotional support system dynamics expert. We have people who do that in the system dynamics field. There are people who do simulation models of emotional activity. They're psychologists. They work with psychologists, therapy, all that. They do it. Not one of those. I work with violence and instability. So there you go. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to follow the InfoMullet, visit us on Facebook or Twitter. And if you'd like notifications when we post new video content, click on the red subscribe button below the video. If you've ever wanted to become a Mulleteer and support the InfoMullet, visit us on Patreon. We appreciate the support.